And we're back for part two on business leadership and strategic challenges and opportunities for CTOs and CIOs, and we'll jump back in. Here's a scenario. I'm getting a coach, okay? So right now, to be a top tier, high performing CTO, CIO, you have to be, strategy, technology, people management, the operations. It's very hard to find any employee who's like super top in all the areas. You can find someone who's really good at one or two, but not all of them. So the CEO comes in and says, "Okay, CTO, CIO, I'm going to get you a coach, a business coach that's going to help you help grow the business, grow your department." What is this? Is this like a writings on the wall that you're like underperforming? Is this the gift of a lifetime? Like why? What, are they
I
are they
had
trying to resuscitate the body on the table that you're not performing properly?
so I had a situation a number of years ago where not the CEO but the call it the next level down was essentially said, you know what, we think you need coaching, and the communication of it was done in such a ham-handed way that the person basically said, "There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing." No, wrong. And the short version is that they never got the coaching they needed, right? Because it wasn't positioned correctly. What I would say for anybody who's offered coaching is to number one, make sure the coach, answers to you and only you. It's a confidential sort of service. Number one. Number two, if you're the person who's offering the coaching, I'm speaking to the CEOs or the board chairs here, is to say, you know something, we think you've got what it takes. But I think that there's more potential in you, and we want to make sure that we invest so that you can realize that potential. Here's a couple of things that we hope that the coach and you can spend some time working on, but the actual conversations that you have in the coach are between you and the coach. Okay, we'd like you to meet Randall and just see if there's a good fit. And from my perspective, I don't think everyone's coachable. I just don't think so. Right. So what I would do is I would say, hey, let's after an introductory call, let's just do a coach session. Let's spend an hour together. Ask me anything. Let's just see how it goes. And at the end of that, either it's, yeah, okay, I think this person is coachable. I think it'd be great to work. I think it'd make a difference with them. And from their perspective is, yeah, I think this person's a good fit for me. And I think this person truly actually understands what I need to get done and so on. So that's from a coaching perspective, how it's introduced is really important. I think very often coaching is not just for CEOs or it's not just for people in the sales area. I think it's for any leader, particularly at the C-suite level. Um, I think it's for any leader, frankly, because there's not so many people you can talk to. You don't want to talk to your boss sometimes about some of the crazy ideas that you have that would make a real difference. You can't talk to your direct reports because some of your ideas aren't fully formed and you might not get, unbiased, perspective. And just for clarity, the coaching that I do is not, accountability coaching, or it's not how to make you more empathetic or more assertive or so on. It's really helping you see around the corners that you might not have seen, or helping prep you in a way for that next role, with some very practical ideas, right? So I think that's important too.
When we think about that top tier leadership, that top tier leader, they're leading people, right? So even though this T and this I, the jurisdiction, their delegated responsibility is the tech or the information, really it's people, that team development, the tools they need, the tech, timing. How much of a CTO or CIO's brain space should be focused on, retaining, recruiting, developing, harnessing, managing those people? Or is it reasonable and appropriate to expect HR to really be on top of that?
No, I think tech people are special. Okay, they tend to be, highly thinking people who are exceptionally capable. They've often had educational backgrounds that are top tier, right? And that needs to be recognized. You want to take advantage of that. I think sometimes, if you've got a CTO who's really focused on what that future platform or architecture or technology thing might be, I mean, maybe that's where they should be spending a big chunk of their time. Maybe that CIO needs to really double down on cybersecurity and threat assessment and risk, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the success of the organization is a function of everybody within their teams actually working, collectively and intelligently, and they need care and feeding. And so if that leader ignores the people that work underneath them, there's a risk there, isn't there? And the bigger the organization, the bigger the risk. So no, they need to do stuff. And what does that stuff mean? Sometimes it's not, by the way, let's go out for pizza, okay, and call it a Christmas party. No, it's saying, how do we make sure that we're giving people the professional development they need to technically do their job? Ooh, their job involves dealing with people. How do we give people the professional development they need to build a more cohesive culture within the organization, within your IT organization, and also within the entire organization? Let me ask a question. A lot of people who've come up through the technical ranks, they don't really have as much business training. Many of them didn't do an MBA or didn't sort of, go through the business side as opposed to a technical career path. What kind of business acumen training do you think would make a difference if they understood a little bit more about how business in general and your organization specific actually works, right? Because if they understand a little bit more of that picture, perhaps the decisions they'll make day to day will be a little bit better, or their interactions with others in the organization might have a little bit deeper understanding, right? So whether it's the kind of professional development you drip in, or whether it's the team training, or maybe for your most senior, the high potentials, that might be coaching even. You can't ignore it because otherwise it's just you as the leader. You've got to manage up, but you also have to manage down.
I want to talk about AI, and we can take this in any direction you want. Do you think your average CTO, CIO, capable, smart, on top of trends and everything, do you think the feeling is that they think AI is like overhyped and it's been around, it's being used, just it's now the new toy of the public, but like they're on top of it, this is not a big surprise? Or do they really think it's underhyped and that the vision is so much bigger than any of us can think? It's like a mix of both. Like, what do you think?
So this is the wonderful I depends. Okay, in some organizations, the head tech person is truly a visionary, and they could sort of see kind of where this is going a million miles away. And the organization recognizing it relies on that particular vision. Not everybody is in that particular situation. In other cases, the IT group is almost thought of as the preventers of getting things done, which is terribly unfortunate, because I'm sure that's not their intention. But as a result of that, it's like let's not do anything because issues of risk or uncertainty or whatever it happens to be. In other organizations, boy, it's somewhere in between, right? And I think that it depends on the individual as well. What I would say for those people that are it can do anything, I think you need a reality check, right? Recent research has said that 95% of AI-based pilot projects end in failure. Well, guess what? Why does that happen? Were they oversold? Were the right and wrong pilots chosen? Were the wrong pilots not have the kind of support they needed? But at the very end, it reflects on everybody involved, right? On the other hand, organizations that say, well, no, 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 can't have AI here. Well, guess what? All of your employees are probably already doing it on their phones. They're probably already figuring out a number of these things at very high risk. So, how do you find that middle path in a way that actually allows the organization to use AI strategically, doesn't oversell it, okay, but doesn't undersell it? And the answer is actually very simple. Where is your role in providing that AI leadership and education to the organization? Either things that you might choose to do yourself, or preferably to bring in somebody externally to provide that kind of third-party endorsement and knowledge that then you and your colleagues can run with. And you could point to that and say, well, why not that? Why not that? We did keynote at a conference. Lots of people in the audience, and guess what? Everybody was brought up the same level. Everyone now has the same vocabulary. Everybody sort of understands the risks in a way that they didn't before. Oh, I'm sure if AI acceptable use policy was brought in, people would understand the why of why it needs to be on there. And in terms of what they might do on their own little devices, I think they'd have a better understanding of what to do, what not to do because of that. There's all kinds of different ways that you could be the hero by moving the organizational IQ up to that next level. So yeah, there's a lot that can and should be done, and you have a choice to do it or not.
Well said. Randall, I touched on a mix of different topics here, but are there any key ideas you want to give airtime to that we haven't
Yeah,
yet?
I think one of the most important things really is, and I don't want to say this is a revolution, but I think the best CIOs and CTOs realize that they've had to switch from being almost reactive to being proactive. Of course, the smallest organizations are always proactive because you don't have a choice. So much is going on. But for mid-sized and large organizations, is that role of CIO or CTO one that is proactive as a reactive? How do you bring credibility to your role, particularly in non-tech areas of the business? Whether it's operations or marketing or HR, any parts of the business. And I think that this is a very, very exciting thing that you can do in terms of being proactive. Here's a whole bunch of them. I'm just thinking about how you build up that trust, that collaborative energy with these other groups. Number one, I would do is I would identify and remove whatever the irritants are that each of your fellow C-suite leaders actually have. What is the biggest irritant in the HR group? Okay, that you can actually control. How about in marketing? How about internal communications? How about accounting? How about in the various operational aspects of the business? What's the irritant? Okay, because once you get rid of the irritant, then that opens the door to saying, okay, how might we work together? And so I've got a bunch of ideas on that one. I think that the one-on-one relationship building, and by the way, whether it's doing simple things like going out for a meal or breakfast, or spending time on your leadership retreats, just one-on-one having conversations, or actually doing it as a group, that's one way of doing it. Another way, what if you had proactive presentations to each of the different groups on workflows and strategic improvements, and maybe it's something where you're pulling information, and most of the more sophisticated IT groups, they've got a client service kind of person for each of the different groups anyway. I'm saying go beyond that, okay, and invest a little bit of time and effort to say, okay, maybe AI is the topic that you're going to talk about. Maybe it's doing more listening to find out. Maybe it's sharing a bit of the issues and trends in your particular area that's relevant to them. So every group would have a different presentation. Here's another idea. What if you had a secondment of some of your staff, a one-for-one swap with one of these departments? What if there was somebody in your group that said it went into, say, marketing, and somebody from marketing came into your group for, say, 3 months, or HR, or any of the other groups within the organization? Because what that does is it fosters understanding at a much deeper level than just the senior leadership. What if you did an innovation retreat amongst your team, okay, just specifically to focus on innovating on a particular idea and to embed a more innovative culture, to brainstorm, maybe, solve a particular key challenge. Maybe it's to convene an AI retreat where you can bring a key person from every group together and go through all the different things. Maybe part of it can be a knowledge share. Maybe part of it can be hands-on. Part of it can be brainstorming. Part of it can bring some of these ideas, but there's an output to that kind of thing. What are the pilot projects? I think there's a whole ton of ways that you could start to build in some of the collaborative aspect, and where the IT group, your group is not just viewed as being just the managers of the pipe, if you will, managers of the app, etc., but actually true business partners, because you're actually taking a proactive leadership role in helping each of these groups do what they need. Which, by the way, echoes up the chain, because when you're having the conversations around the senior leadership table, okay, about the business impact, you'll have a lot of information that's bubbled up from a lot of these collaborative type activities where you can bring some new knowledge to whatever the challenge happens to be. It also means that you'll have a much better handle when it comes to anything that you do at the board level, particularly with respect to, say, cybersecurity or IP protection or the various other risks that you might be responsible for. So I think that there's an awful lot. The best are already doing some of these things. My challenge to you would be to say, what can you do to do more so that you as a leader, okay, are not just seen as the tech department, but that you're actually providing input into the strategy and the successful execution of whatever the tactics are.
Do you have any other topics you wanna share?
Um, I think I think there's two other areas that I think are worthy of conversation. There's two. One is the intersection between marketing and the marketing function, if you will, and the technology and technology function. Because in a certain sense, we think there's only two partners here, right? But there's actually five, right? There's your group and the marketing group. But no, there's your group, there's marketing group, there's a marketing group, and there's also, thank you very much, the outside world, the clients, the prospects, the customers, that group. So that's three. But then, no, 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 it's not just those three. There's actually two others because for the marketing group, there may also be an agency involved, right? From your perspective, there may also be some platforms involved, some SaaS products or functionality, etc. So now we're up to five, right? This is becoming very, very complicated very, very quickly. And it's not a question of saying, well, whose turf is this on or whose relationship that is. You're part of the same organization. And I think that building a very, very, very tight understanding between the CMO and the CIO, CTO is critically important because, they're in charge of actually, getting the business in the door, if you will. You're responsible to make sure that it's a frictionless experience, that there's the efficiencies, that the digital brand, if you want to call it that, in terms of the execution of any touch point that involves technology is one that's synchronized with what the promises that the folks on the marketing side make. And because the agency types will always be coming up with ideas, because the platform types will always be coming up with ideas, because there's going to be all kinds of market research or feedback from customers and prospects about what their needs might be, the environment is changing, etc. And because the individual people, okay, in the marketing side and your side, you're smart people too. There's an awful lot that needs to be managed. And the more that there's that transparency, I don't know if I'm suggesting, hey, you should have like a marketing technology summit in a certain sense to sort of hash some of these things out, to build the relationships on one hand, to build the tighter plans and processes and culture with respect to how you manage this shared responsibility. Yes, so-and-so is responsible for this and you're responsible for that. But from the outsider's perspective, it's just one company. And I think that that's something that needs an awful lot more time because almost every organization I've been in, it's almost, I don't want to say silo-wise, but it's clearly one side of the fence and the other. And it need not be. It need not be. So that's one thing I wanted to share. I think there's also one other thing that CIO, CTOs have that's actually, I don't want to say unique, but it's interesting to me anyway. There's a continuum of arms and legs that can do the work. There's employees, there's long-term contractors, there's consultants, okay, and then you could outsource it completely or outsource in a hybrid way. You could insource it to in North America, which is where we're located, or part of it abroad, overseas. Like there's a continuum here, right? And it's an interesting thing about, gee, how do you make the decision, sort of where to put the work, where does it actually happen? And there's obviously things like cost, right? There's issues like you want 24-hour coverage and so on. But nowadays there's also several other factors as well. There's a political dimension. Gee, the work needs to be done in this country. Particularly if your organization is serving governments, there's a deglobalization trend that's happening. There's marketing considerations, about what you want to be able to say, right? And what your clients and partners might expect. There's some of the strategic questions that you might have. Gee, we don't really want to be becoming a specialist in fill in the blank. We could outsource this to an organization that's specialized in it, and actually it might even be cheaper, right? So there's those kinds of things that we have to think about. But my question to the group really is, okay, so if you've made the decision that people are going to be in those four buckets, employees, long-term contractors, consultants, and we're just going to outsource it. Consultants meaning for a particular project or a campaign if it's an agency. Um, where do you want to spend your time and effort in terms of building up the core knowledge within your group? Are you going to spend it all on the outsourced folks? No, you just want to make sure, that's our answer. No, you just want to make sure that they could actually crank through what they're, like a machine, what they're supposed to do, right? That's kind of why you decided to outsource in the first place. It's not strategic. So where your spending is not there. But a lot for the agencies or for the consultants that come in to solve a problem or to do a campaign and then off they go, etc. It's probably not where you want to spend either, right? Because those are a lot more transient. Long-term contractors, well, if they're part of your team, yeah, it makes sense to invest in them. And employees, for sure, it makes sense to invest in them as well, right? And when I say investments, I'm not talking about technical skills, although that's clearly something that you do need to make sure they're up to speed on. But it's also some of the other things, right? How can they be more innovative in their job? How can they sort of build stronger relationships, right? Some of the soft skills that are necessary for them to function effectively, okay, as part of your team, okay, as well as part of the bigger organization as well. And I share this with you because I think so often people outside the IT group think that the only kind of training that IT people need is technical training. Yeah, they need that because of the nature of their job. In the same way that somebody in HR needs to have training on the latest HR laws, right? Or the accountants need training on the latest accounting standards, right? But I think that if you're working within an organization where you do want that collaboration, where innovation is important, where change and the pace of change is actually pretty high, you need to make sure that other types of training and upskilling actually happens. And when you do, it just becomes an awful lot easier when they're interacting with other parts of the organizations, not purely on a technical level, but on a business level, which means that that particular group, employees and potentially long-term contractors, they also are not just talking from a pure technology IT hat, but they're also modeling that business leadership, mindset that we're suggesting that you need to move to your next level in your career.
I want to ask you, Randall, about technical debt. Many large and long-standing organizations, like governments, for instance, are victims of their early adoption, of early tech and are trapped in large, interconnected Frankenstein-like legacy systems. Um, like, what's the Randall Craig perspective, and like, what will it take to move the flywheel? Like, what will it take to get, and what should the, joint efforts of the new generation of CTOs, CIOs be to overcome this challenge?
So, when I talk to CFOs and CEOs, one of the things I'll talk about is zero-based disruption budgeting, zero-based disruption budgeting, which essentially says that, and most people know what zero-based budgeting is. You start with zero, and then you figure out exactly how much you want to spend in the different categories, as opposed to regular budgeting, where you take what you did last year and you just increment it by a little bit. So add the word disruption to it, where you say, if we were able to start from scratch, what would we actually do? Where would we spend? And in the IT sort of space, what would we build and how would we actually execute it? If, for example, you were to start from scratch, i.e., there was no technical debt, and you would do it this completely different way, where the paradigm is completely shifted. And we saw this a little while back when people were moving from on-premise systems to cloud-based systems, and people had to think about it, but maybe not in exactly these terms, right? I think that it's worthwhile to take another look. COVID is way, way, way in our rear view mirror at this point. The movement to SaaS is way, 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 but the job's not done, right? So what would it take, for example, to take a skunkworks group of people, not just in your group, but maybe from some of your internal client groups, and say, you know something, if we were to start this from scratch, what would it look like? And you know what? I'm talking about the technology architecture and service um, delivery using technology and the processes around them. And if, for example, they came up with something that was so vastly different and there was a business case for it, then you've got the plan, and it's just a question of saying, okay, let's see about growing that in the background, then doing a cutover. On the other hand, what might actually happen is that when you look at what this group comes up with, and by the way, the objective here isn't just to come up with that other thing, but what you're doing is you're improving the creative and innovative energy that exists within your organization. You're building collaborative relationships at the same time. So it's not just for this, that's not the only benefit. But what you'll probably find is that the path from what they come up with to what you should move toward, or what you have right now. Let me say that again. What you may find is that the path to go from what you have now to what they may have defined may not be as complex as you might have thought. In which case, if you take a look at what your roadmap is with respect to your apps and with respect to your processes and everything, um, you may change some of your priorities and you may put some of those things on the list, right? And therefore, the technical debt in time will be paid, right? So.
Randall, we're coming up on the hour. Do you have any final thoughts to leave us with, or do you feel you've unburdened your heart?
My final message is for those uh, my final message is for those CIOs, CTOs who are saying, okay, I'm in a particular place. It's actually pretty good. I've got a great job. I've got a great boss. I've got a great team. Um, how do I get to that next level? How do I make sure that I don't start getting bored, right? And what I would say is that there's a lot that you can do. It's all within your power to actually get to that next level. You may not know everything yourself, but you know what? The problem's been solved before. Okay, the problem's been solved before. And hopefully some of the ideas we shared with you on this particular leadership Q&A are the ones that can spark some conversations and some exciting futures for everybody.
Thank you, Randall, for sharing all this information and perspective. Thank you to everyone who's joined and listened in. If any of the issues you've talked about so far resonate with you, if you're considering change in your organization for yourself, for your team, if you're planning a leadership retreat, if you're curious about coaching, how to better align your team, do reach out. We'd be happy to learn about your organization, share resources. And if you'd like to get invites to these monthly sessions, do reach out to podcast@randallhay.com, and we'll look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn. See you next time.